Who's ready for another awesome members only full length painting tutorial? Now this video is going to run about an hour long, so sit back and enjoy as we paint out this awesome zombie eye. Now it's not really a zombie eye. I guess you can categorize it type of just a removed eye, popped out eye, maybe zombie eye. I don't know. I guess it depends on how you paint it. You know, you can make the eye like a milky white or something like that. Somebody even wanted me to paint it in like an Egyptian look, so I'll probably paint this a few different ways in the near future as we kind of progress through this overall members only painting playlist and journey here. So we're going to begin this process like we do a lot of times, and we're going to go ahead and apply some general shadows with some Mars Black. Now we're just going to kind of go around the interior, like kind of nooks and crannies, and around the iris of the eye, just darkening that out a little bit. This isn't a necessity as far as the process, but it does help along the way with your mind's eye if you're just getting into painting to understand where your darker shadows are probably going to be as you build up those layers throughout the painting process. Now in this version of the removed popped out eye, we're going to make the eye just a nice kind of a bright blue, and then we'll kind of make the overall meat of the eye, like the nerve, kind of like a nice bloody gore-tastic look to it. Now, of course, any of you members out there, if you're interested in buying one of these as a paintable and painting along with this tutorial, just let me know and I will definitely create a listing for you. I sell these relatively cheap to my members here on YouTube. So if you want to follow along, then you can get your hands on one of these little paintables and you can detail paint yours along the way with this tutorial. It'd be kind of fun to have you guys also post your versions of these paintables on my community page here on YouTube. Super exciting. So if anybody's interested in painting their own, just reach out to me and let me know and we can make that happen. I probably will only sell these paintables on a member by member basis. I probably won't mass produce and sell them like that, just because I want to make sure that no one's really copying my overall designs and things like that. We don't want to make it easy for people to copy our artistic designs. Now, if you want one of these magnets completely ready to go on the refrigerator, I also do sell those on Etsy, as well as a keychain also. So if you want to hang it from a book bag or something like that, then you can definitely do so. At this point, I'm going to get some new paints out here, and we're actually just going to lay the paints on the silicone mat here that I'm painting on top of. I had just cleaned this mat right before I started this video, so super clean, and it's very nice. It won't stay clean for very long because I do a lot of projects, and that just means I can get kind of messy sometimes. So we're going to begin laying out some new paints here, and here in a moment I'll actually just put some of this on the silicone mat, but I just start off by just getting the excess out of the cap from the tube. Now this is a Winsor & Newton pink rose. I do like to start off a lot of my meat textures with this just because it gives it a really great texture and underpainting. So a lot of the meat around a lot of the nerves and things like that would naturally have a little bit of a pinker tone to them, and a lot of people just go straight into the crimsons and the alizarin crimsons and the reds, and that's not really how meat texture is, right? So you need to make sure it has a little bit of just a pink tone to it, just a pink hue. And that's the goal. We're going to begin building up the layers. So will this kind of be blended underneath a lot of those red layers? Of course it will. But it's going to bring a little bit of depth to it because those layers will be built up on top of this. Now throughout the process, I will be painting over some of these darker shadows. So those will also get washed out, but they'll darken the paint that goes over top of them. It just makes the item feel a little bit more realistic throughout the process. So we'll sit back, we'll go ahead and get this pink rose kind of over the entire nerve, and then we'll start to pull out some other paints here. Now just be aware, we're still working with the same layer overall. That paint is just building up. So as I paint one side then move to the other, it's just giving it ample time to dry as I build up those layers. And it's just becoming more opaque with every layer that we apply. Next up, we're going to start to paint the whites of the eye. I've darkened that out quite a bit, so as we build up the layers to a white, like white to a Naples yellow, it'll really bring up the color combination quite a bit. Now I'm going to begin the whites of the eye not with titanium white. We're going to use titanium white later just as the highlight, but what we're going to use is a Naples yellow. I want the eyes to have a little bit of a dinge to them, so that way they look like they're just not freshly popped out or something like that. And let's be honest though, if something were to happen to your eye and it were to pop out, that thing would be bloodshot. Let's be real, and because it would be so agitated. So the odds of having a titanium white eye is not realistic. I don't think. Maybe I don't think so. So we're going to go ahead and go around the entire whites of the eye with the Naples yellow, just being very careful where I push that into all the nooks and crannies along where the nerve is making contact and rolling over the back of the eye. So sit back, we'll go ahead and work our way around here, and then we'll start to build up other colors as this begins to dry. We will be working in washes throughout this painting tutorial, so some of this color will kind of couple or kind of buckle a little bit, because we will be using a little bit of ink along the way, and the ink on fresh paint just pulls it up a little bit, and it kind of creates different textures as we begin to paint on those layers. If you were to wait for it to be completely fully cured and dry, then you wouldn't get that coupling and those really cool effects. Alright, so as we start to build up some of those other layers here, you can really see that it's starting to transform a little bit. It's no longer really just that casted item anymore. We're starting to get some color combination, and you'll start to see where the overall paint scheme is going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit more pink rose out here, and we're just going to go over a few last times. This will be the last time that I work with this color for the most part. I may do a little bit of highlight here and there along the way, but this is pretty much it. And then we'll put this color off to the side. And again, this is Winsor & Newton Pink Rose, and it does have a real pinkish tint to it, but as you start to build up more of those layers, it gets redder and redder from the undercoats that you're applying. Once this portion of the nerve is completely covered to our satisfaction, then we'll start to work on the iris of the eye. And again, we're going to have a blue iris, and I think that I'm going to try to include a little bit of glow pigment in that throughout the process, so stay tuned for that. Alright, so we're starting to finish up with the pink rose here. It's really getting pretty thick and opaque. And then we're going to go ahead and start working with the blue of the eye. Now, I've got a new pack of paints, and they're really neon glow paints. Well, I wouldn't say glow. They're more so just neons, very vibrant. And we're going to begin the iris of the eye with this neon blue. and I was really wanting to test out to see how actual neon it really was, and man, I'm not disappointed at all. This color is absolutely awesome. Now we're going to build up a lot of layers here, so a lot of this will get washed out throughout the process of the painting of the iris, but still pretty cool. I like how bright it is, and I'm very impressed by it. So we're making sure to push that down into that sculpted crease line around the outside edge of the iris. And we're just going to make sure that we get a really great coverage all the way around into all those nooks and crannies. I'm actually in love with this paint color here, and I'm applying a little bit thicker layers over some areas where it kind of thinned out a little bit. And again, we were painting over that Mars black base. I'm going to go in with a little bit of, yes, you heard me, titanium white. And while this is still a little bit not cured to / wet, we're going to go ahead and apply a little bit of that titanium white in like a wash layer. Not very thick, just enough to give it some glare around the eyeball itself. So the whites of the eyes are going to get an upgrade on the color. It's going to look really good. Now I'm not going to cover it fully, so some of those areas I'll kind of leave like little paint strokes or indentions, as it were, where the eye would have just variations in color. There we go. Applying a little bit of a thicker paint there, really just letting it kind of cake off the end of the brush. And then I'll go back to my Naples yellow as I see fit to blend a little bit of that out. A little bit of blending is okay, but you also sometimes just really want, changes in color, so that way it just doesn't feel like it's so cartoonish. Slowly work our way around the overall eyeball before moving on to the next color. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I like the Naples yellow. It is absolutely awesome. So we're going to go ahead and start working on the eye a little bit more here, like the actual iris of the eye. And we're going to start to work on some of those higher sculpted textures and edges. We're going to come in with a titanium white just to brighten the overall center of the eye, so we can start to add other colors and dinge them out and vice versa. So that way we can just get a lot of variation in those colors inside the iris. If you're asking, yeah, that's titanium white. It's okay. Now my goal here is, because it's titanium white, well, this will just be like an undercoat on the upper highlights. And then as we start to build up more colors, a lot of this will get kind of washed out. But if anything else, the raised highlights would just have a brighter color. So I'm just letting that paint just kind of roll off the end of the brush there. I'm just using a little micro brush for this. It's nothing special, just something easy to work with, and just something just to take your time and be methodical about. You just get a little bit of paint, and it's just one or two high raised edges, and then move on to the next location. There's no point in just continuously sitting there. Painting a little bit of the interior of the iris there. Try not to take it too far. I don't want that eye to really blend over onto the whites of the eyeball. So I'm just trying to keep that overall color of the iris separated away from that, just so it looks like a clean cut eye. It doesn't have a bunch of bleed over and things like that. I'm also trying to paint this in a way that if somebody wanted to, they could simply just take this overall kind of paint process, and they could just change up the colors and then just do it however they want. Going around the interior of the whites of the eye, right where it makes contact with the iris, with a little bit of titanium white, just bring a highlight to that raised edge. I just think that it would be kind of cool to do so. Being very selective about where I put those wider highlights here, and then you'll see as soon as I go over it with the next coat of paint that it really just washes all these textures out that I'm applying now. It's looking pretty good so far. I do like the blue. I think it looks pretty cool. I just think that blue, this is the first one that would kind of catch a bunch of eyes, and it would be pretty popular to create and resell. Now we're going to go into a Winsor blue from Winsor & Newton. Absolute great color, and it's a very dark, rich color compared to ultramarine blue, which is more so like, I don't know, it's just a lighter blue. This is just a lot darker, that's all. Darkening out the exterior edges of the iris there. But I'm not covering it all up, right? I'm letting some of those highlights that I had painted before survive. And once it's all painted out, it's going to look really good. It's going to apply just general shading around the iris of the eye without really having to do so. Almost went off screen here, guys. I apologize. That's one thing about painting such small little items, is sometimes it's hard not to stay fully on the screen, you know? So yeah, we do what we can, right? Alright, so as we finish up with the Windsor blue here, we're going to start to shift back to our reds, and we're going to get another paint layer on the nerve of the eye. When we do pull out this next layer of red, it's going to be the darker red. So we've already put on a layer of pink, and we're going to start to build up into the darker reds before we go back into the lighter, more fresh blood type of reds, like crimson and permanent red hue, things like that. So we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of that Windsor blue in the interior of the eye, the pupil, but we're going to come back with some black later on, and we'll kind of paint that out again. It's no big deal. I want to have a little bit of that color in there as well. Now this is going to give me a little bit of a meticulous process. I'm going to use this little micro brush here, and I'm going to go around all of the nooks and crannies around where the nerve, where the meat of the nerve is making contact with the eyeball itself. And I'm going to go ahead and paint all of those little kind of ripples of meat texture, completely paint them out. So you're going to see that the blood simulation of meat is really going to start to increase. So you're going to, the darkness of that permanent alizarin crimson is really going to transform the nerve into something extremely cool. So it's going to be really cool and icky and gross and gore-tastic. That is my word, man. I'm going to have to like kind of patent that word somehow or trademark it. Gore-tastic. When you want to paint a bunch of bloody, nasty zombies and eyeballs and fingers and ears, and gore-tastic is the best way to describe it. So you'll notice I'm not going to push into all of the nooks and crannies for this, but I do want some of those undershadows to survive. So I'm going to be very selective about where I do apply this red. As it starts to dry out, then we'll go into the brighter colors of the red for like blood texture and overpainting and dry brushing over this this base coat of a pink rose as well as permanent alizarin crimson. So sit back, guys. We're just going to work our way around the meat of the eyeball, and then we'll catch you back in the next painting portion. I told you guys this was a real-time painting video, so I do hope you guys are sitting back and enjoying the process. When I am in the studio like this, working on something small like this, it was very detailed, but I'm wanting to put a lot of detail work into it instead of just painting it real quick and getting it out the door. I want to put as much of my own artistic flair and enjoyment into it by taking my time. I believe that each piece of art really does deserve its own amount of time here in my studio. And this is no exception. So although I'm recording for YouTube and painting, I'm really just chilling and enjoying the process. So some people may get hung up like, well, wow, you spent an hour and 10 minutes to paint this little eyeball. Yeah, and it was enjoyable every minute of the way. So pretty cool, right? Now we're going to use this sepia wash that I just got out, and it's $1 and roundy sepia. It's an acrylic ink, and I went ahead and watered it down in a silicone bowl, and we're going to use it throughout the process to give us a nice wash layer. So we're going over the interior of the eye with this. We're also going to go around the whites of the eye, and this is where we're going to get that buckling of the paint layers. And it's going to look really cool. So I'm going to put quite a bit of it on there, and I'm letting that sink into all of the nooks and crannies around where the meat is touching the eyeball, and all of the crease lines around the nerve. It's going to look really good. This is really going to kind of bring up the age and the decay of the item a little bit and make it feel a little bit more realistic, even though it is a casted item and it's plastic, but it's just going to bring up the overall dinginess quite a bit. Kind of patting that on there, making sure I get a lot of different textures, and if it dries, pat it on like that, it looks really cool. Going over the nerve here as well, kind of pushing that in. Let the wash do the work for you. You just touch it with the tip of your brush, the wash comes off and settles into the nook and cranny that you're working with at the time, and then let it dry, at least mostly in that position, and it kind of brings up the realism of the item a little bit. As you can see, we started at the very top with the wash, and now we're almost at the bottom of the eyeball here, darkening it out quite a bit. But don't worry, we're not done yet. We're going to apply some more red blood tones over these darker shades once this is dry. So we'll hit this with a heat gun in a minute, and then we can expedite the dry time and move on to the next awesome color. This looking good so far, right? I think so. I do hope you guys are enjoying the nice, awesome rock and roll background music. This music is courtesy of Creator Mix. That's the Nimmin brothers over there who have that on their website. And I decided just to download one of their rock and roll playlists, and I'm letting that roll throughout this video. So of course you can link their information in the description below if you'd like to check out some of their awesome content, kind of music. They have all sorts of different lo-fis and rock and roll and things like that. So they do offer some royalty-free music, and I'm taking advantage of that. So appreciate them guys. So as you can see here, I'm coming in with a little bit more of that wash here. This is going to be the sepia wash, and I'm just going to let this kind of settle into all these nooks and crannies here, and just let the water do the work for you. You really don't have to work a whole lot to get it to kind of sit into all the nooks and crannies around the outside edges of the meat of the bloody texture here. Making sure to push that into the kind of the nooks and crannies around really where it's making contact with the whites of the eyeball. And we want to make sure we create a lot of depth there. So it'll take quite a few layers to build up the overall look that we would like with that. Depending on the color that we're kind of painting this, depends on how the overall theme goes. Whether or not we make the eye like a milky white or something like that. I might make one perhaps in the future with like a milky white or I had a patron here on YouTube also recommend that I make one out of gold. But who knows? Maybe we'll make one later on down the road in like that overall Egyptian type of look that person had recommended. So I do take my recommendations from my YouTube subscribers seriously. And when people try, to go out of their way to comment and request videos, I will hopefully go out of my way to create some of those videos for you guys. Because again, you're the ones who enjoy the content. Although I do enjoy just making what I want to make as an artist, I do also want to make things that are entertaining to watch and that you guys can engage with. So it's just pretty cool. So I'm reducing a little bit of that water there, and I'm just going to go ahead and kind of stipple that color around the edges of the white of the eye. And we're just going to go ahead and kind of leave a little bit of that watermarks on there, and then we'll let it dry as it sees fit as we layer in some more colors around the overall little painted item here. So we're just going to kind of let that water settle there, and then as it evaporates, it leaves the color behind. Applying a little bit more color here. Just going over the whites, the white highlights that I had dry brushed over some of those sculpted textures with a little bit more of a sepia wash here. It's going to darken it out a little bit more, and then we'll go back and forth between like vibrant blue and sepia washes and then dark colors until we just get the overall kind of buildup that we want. We just don't want it to be one like solid color in any way. We want to make sure that it has a lot of depth and a lot of variety to the color combinations, and well, we don't want it to look muddy either. So waiting the proper amount of time for the paint to dry before you put another layer or another wash on is pretty important. And we'll just meet that perfect medium between kind of like blended in and washed out. And color isolation. Hopefully I'm making sense there. Going to continuously come in with that black, and we're going to make sure that the pupil of the eye is completely kind of blackened out. So we don't want to make sure that we leave that too light a color, because again, we're not making the eye too super milky or anything like that. So we want to make sure we darken that out again, and then that way the eyeball makes it look like it's looking at you. Again, remember, this is a magnet, you guys, so this will go on the refrigerator or like on my boom arm of my lighting fixture here in the studio, or something that's similar fashion. And this is just one of many that I'm creating, but I want to make sure that it kind of makes it look like the eye is looking at the individual who's also looking back at it, if it makes any sense. So continuously bringing in a little bit of that titanium white there, but we're going to go over the iris again in just a few seconds. So let's go ahead and give that a little bit of time to dry out there before we come back around to the actual iris and the pupil itself. And let's go ahead and get another layer of kind of bloody buildup and texture over the nerve of the eye. So we've already dinged it out again with the washes, and you can really see a lot of those darker sepias recessed into all of those sculpted textures, right? But along the way, when you do that, it also darkens out just the natural highlights or raised edges as well, and that's completely okay. And it's all about layers and buildup of depth, right? So it's all give and take, and you darken it out, and then you come back and you add some highlights, and that's what these are. And we're not working into the the cadmium red hue quite yet, which is more of a little bit of an orange color to it. And we're really just working with the crimsons here to build up these highlights and the raised edges again. But as we go over this, those darker recesses are going to get saved, and it's going to look really good. So we're really just layering it on here, making sure to use the side of the brush and just kind of letting the sculpted textures that we had created during the sculpting process of this, and of course are casted now, take on those paints off the side of the brush. I've really just burned through all that paint that I had dolloped out on my silicone mat here, and we're just going to continue with this process here. Doing my best just to kind of not cover up all of those recessed dark sepia areas. I want it to be a very dark, dingy item when I get done, and whether or not it looks like it has fresh blood on it or not, that's neither here nor there. But the most important thing is just to have a nice dinged out, like zombie-like type of item here that can go in the overall same paint theme and scheme as the overall magnet set that I'm creating. The next item that I'll be creating in this magnet set will be the zombie ear, which will be pretty cool. It'll be very simplistic in a lot of ways, same overall blood texture, and we're probably going to make that match with the green finger that we had also painted previously. So you can check out that video if you'd like to. Just like this one, that is a member only full-length tutorial, and we'll do the same thing for the ear as well. So of course, if you're seeing this, odds are the ear had already been created and produced as well, so you'll be able to find that in the link playlist at the very end of this video. I also will offer that in an extreme time lapse. If you just want to just hit it up real quick on lunch, you can just see me blast through that paint job. Again, same overall green texture that we did the first zombie finger. Continuing on with that crimson there, and it's drying out now on my silicone mat, and I'll actually start working out of the cap of the paint tube in just a second. I'm able to use the paint caps on a lot of these colors simply because I'm not mixing the colors. I'm just using them as just the raw colors, and in these types of paint jobs, instead of mixing up a custom red or a custom orange or something like that, where I don't want it to be, you know, back in the tube or anything, I'm letting the washes that I'm adding kind of dinge out those colors the way that I want to. If you didn't want to use the washes, you would want to mix up those colors depending on how you feel for the project that you're painting. Maybe we'll paint something again in the near future with that overall technique and just let the washes not really apply to the item. I don't want to neglect the back of the magnet here. You can still see where that little divot is that I had originally kind of drilled a pilot hole to see how deep the magnet was in the item. And this version only has one magnet set inside of it, whereas a lot of them have like two or three magnets inside. but they're not super extremely strong magnets, so they're not going to hold like cardboard to the refrigerator, but they will hold like maybe a 1 or 2 pieces of paper or something like that. And they're more like just artistic designs more than just actual functioning magnets for like hardcore like use. So I just don't want to neglect the back of the item, because we'll clear coat this when we get done with both the front and the back. That way it's just a really fully encapsulated, protected item. And it's just a really good quality item when I produce it and I sell it out of the studio. I'm using a much smaller brush here, just like kind of a little micro brush, and I'm making sure to kind of paint the inner lip of the skin texture, or the nerve, the eye socket, the meat of the eye around the eyeball. And I want to make sure that it looks like some of that meat texture is kind of curling into that recessed edge and going like kind of like overlapping into the back of the eye there. And it makes it feel a little bit more realistic as far as just the overall like casted item, because when I sculpted it, I made sure that those have like a recessed, like rolled over effect edge, and we want to make sure that that red kind of blood tone of the skin or meat continues on as if it were like the eyeballs tucked into this meat texture. If we were to leave that too darkened out, it just wouldn't feel very realistic. So we want to make sure we continue that red color at least a little bit into that nook and cranny around the whole eyeball. Having to shift the item around. That's one good thing about working with an item so small, is I can just move it around in my hand. If it's something extremely large, of course, you have to move yourself around the item. But it works out pretty good overall, how small these items are. Makes it more difficult to record it, of course, but it works out pretty good. Now we're getting 2 more colors out here. We're getting titanium white back out here, and we're also going to get this neon blue. Now this is an extremely bright neon blue, and I'm hoping that it will add a little bit of vibrancy to the iris of the eye. Now, we're not necessarily just doing a dry brush over some of these high raised sculpted edges. We're really letting the color kind of come out from the pupil of the eye, and we don't want to give it full coverage. That's the most important thing here. Whether or not this is just like a glare or a highlight, we don't want to go over saturated with this and cover up the entire iris. We're using this mainly to kind of give the iris a little bit of variation in color. And then we'll come over with more of a pure blue here in just a second, and it will brighten up the overall iris. And I almost go too far with it, honestly. I could have probably reined in a little bit more and not applied as much paint. That way some of that darker edges around the outside of the iris where the whites of the eye are would survive more, but it's okay. It worked out pretty good. I'm hitting that with a little bit of wash immediately, letting that wash kind of settle into all those nooks and crannies. You really see it's changing the color of the white already, and a little bit of that blue that we applied there. It's brightening it up a lot. You see how that white layer kind of brightened the overall iris up, but then the wash is just dinging it out. Now the paint around the outside edges of the nerve socket here is still activated. It's not fully dry. So what I'm doing is we're applying a little bit of a wash here, and actually because it's still kind of wet paint, the red paint's wet, it's going to keep it activated, and it's going to pull it up onto the whites of the eye. So as I come in with this and I start to push some of these layers around here in this water on the whites of the eye, you're going to start to see some of that pink color come up and onto the sides of the whites of the eye, and it makes it look like the eye is super bloodshot or kind of like just agitated, and it adds to the overall zombie like / gore of the item. Is pretty cool. Now we're not going to go crazy with that, right? We don't want to cover up the whites of the eye to where it just looks out of place, but we do want to bring it up a little bit so that it kind of covers it with a little bit of that pink color here. We're going to give it a veiny look in just a few moments here. Putting some of that darker wash color around the outside edges of the iris, letting that sit there. And caking in some more of that wash there around the outside edges of the eyeball. It's looking pretty good so far. Alright, so here we are. It's looking pretty good so far. It's getting more and more intense every layer that we put on it, right? Now, we put a lot of work into this item so far, and the video is almost at the 55-minute mark, and this is, again, a real-time painting process, so you get a real idea of how much time I sometimes invest in some of these items. Obviously, I am recording, so I'm really kind of just laid back and taking my time. I might be watching some Netflix or something like that, but we're just moving right on along with this project here. Now, I'm using a little micro brush with some watered down crimson here, and what I'm doing is I'm just kind of layering in just light lines, sourcing from the nerve and the red texture up and around the edges of the whites of the eyes. Now, the name of the game here is not to overdo it. You could go above and beyond and make it super saturated in red, but I don't want that. I just want to have a nice pink veiny look, and we're just going to kind of keep it nice and simplistic. Now, remember that I had hit it with a ink wash earlier, and it had a little bit of actual alcohol ink in it, and it kind of caused a little bit of that coupling around the edges of the eyeball, and it gave us a really great texture. But as I built up more layers and I hit it with the heat gun, we got more intense textures out of that lower levels of paint, even before any of the washes, right? So now what we're doing is I'm using this little micro brush here to bring some of these red colors into the whites of the eye, and it's going to give us a really great bloodshot look. But because we have so much texture already in the whites of the eye paint as it is, and it's almost hard for the camera to pick up on that, but it's there. If you look very closely enough, it's there. But I'm using that to kind of give me a direction of where I think the little veins should be on the outskirts of the eyeball. And I don't have to have the veins super duper deep and visible. That's why I'm going over it with my finger ever so often, and it will kind of blend that out a little bit. And you don't have to have them super visible. They just need to have subtle hints that there's you know, capillaries or blood veining and agitation in the eye. It doesn't have to be a whole lot, just simplistic little lines in a random fashion without just overdoing it. You don't want to overdo it, that's all. Unless that's the kind of look that you're looking for, and okay, hey, have a heyday with all the bloody veins, but I want very simplistic veins, and the simpler the better. You can see with the brown color over those white layers there, it really does bring out the character of those quite a bit. Alright guys, looking good so far. I'm liking it, and I hope you guys like it as well. Hopefully you made it this far into this full-length tutorial of this removed eyeball, which is pretty cool. And we're very just using kind of simplistic colors for this process. Next up, I'm going to apply just a little bit of a titanium white highlight to the whites of the eye. Not very much at all. And we do plan to give it a UV resin, like clear coat layer. And we're going to make those look like a tear on, like the eyeball had been pulled out and it's got a lot of saturation on it. It's maybe not dripping it like a tear like off the eye, but it will make it look like it has that. So if I can give it a nice little dripping down the nerves, and that's pretty cool, I think. So we're just going to use this titanium white as just a simplistic glare, and we're not going to go crazy with it. But if for some reason there was no glare on the UV resin layers after it's all said and done, then this white layer here underneath that UV resin would give it a kind of a look of a glare. Oh, even if there was no source light that would apply that glare naturally, yeah, in its environment. Okay, I hope I'm explaining that right, guys. But basically, I just want to make sure that glare survives, even if there's no glare in the room. And it makes it feel a little bit more realistic. So that glare is really just coming from one major direction, and then the rest of the item is just dinged out like normal. You'll also notice that when I did that, I went around the veining that I had put in earlier because I didn't want it to kind of wash those veins out. So we're working with that same neon blue and the titanium white again. And we're going to go ahead and start to go over the iris again. Now, this is where we're really going to leave some of this blue in the iris, and this is where it's going to stay and survive. So we're just going to give it that kind of blue highlight that we're wanting as a final result of the paint job. So we start to add a little bit of that titanium white at first. And then as we build up some of those layers and I get kind of happy with how the color combination is going, I'll start to lean more into the neon blue by itself. Just being very nitpicky about where I apply some of those colors and apply some of those blue layers as those highlights. Looking good there. I'm liking it so far. We'll let that blue rest for a few moments here, and I'm just going to give it those veins on the upper tops of the eyeball just a little bit more color here. I just wanted them to just be ever so slightly more visible. I felt like they were just a little bit too washed out. Perhaps I just kind of washed them out with my finger just a little bit too much there. But only very selective veining will actually get this little highlight here. And that way it's just a little bit more visible there. It doesn't take a whole lot of paint to actually make that happen. Looking pretty good. Bringing that pink kind of wash down around the eyeball there. I'm almost off screen, you guys. I do apologize for that. Sometimes we get in the zone when we're painting something like this, and the video editing and format, we just kind of play catch up sometimes. I had a little bit of a darkened out spot right there, and I went ahead and just blended that out there. And now I'm officially off camera. Shame on me, guys. I do apologize. Hang tight. We'll come back into the frame here. A little bit of water there in that layer there, so it kind of pushes some of that pink color around there. Okay, we're back down into the picture frame here, guys. Sorry about that. It happens. But we're, oh, dropped it there. We're looking pretty good so far. I'm not really worried about doing much more to the back. I think it's looking pretty good. We're just going to apply a little bit of color there, see if we can fill in that divot just a little bit. It's looking pretty good. You can see I'm still using that little micro brush there, so I'm not really taking my colors too seriously right now. Just kind of coloring and painting that in a little bit, so that way the divot is just ever so slightly less visible. Small potatoes, I know, but we're just going to use the paint to do the work for us for that. Just painting a little bit extra paint on the bottom of the nerve there. And it's looking pretty good, you guys. I'm liking it. Look at that. So let's go ahead and get a UV light out here and just see how much the actual neon paints that we have here. Again, it's the first time I'm using these, and I'm using these magnets as a means to test out the paint vibrancy and color throughout this process. So I'm mixing it up with other colors, but it's still kind of cool to be able to test it overall. So here we are, we got the UV light, and it's just kind of cascading light down onto the item. It's giving it a slight neon glow. If it were to go and say like a man cave with like a black light or something, or like a gaming room on some filing cabinets beside somebody's gaming computer, it would give it a slight glow. So that's pretty cool. But what I'll do is, because I do have a little bit of glow pigment, I'm going to go ahead and dust on just a small amount, and it might give it a even slightly remotely more of a glow. So we'll go ahead and get that out there, and we'll kind of dust that on, but we're not going to like go above and beyond to mix it with our paints and things like that. So I'm actually just dipping my paintbrush into the neon glow pigments, or powder as it were. It's just an aftermarket Amazon brand. It's nothing of substance to it, and you can probably find that in my Amazon affiliate list below if you're interested in that. But it's still, like I said, small potatoes in the overall grand scale of the project itself. I'm kind of happy with how the overall glow neons did. Because they're not technically labeled as glow pigments. They're just supposed to be like very vibrant neon luminescent paint, and they're not glowing the way I imagined them to, but I also kind of like thinned them out a little bit. So we're going to bring the light back on here, and we're going to go ahead and start gearing up towards applying that UV resin, kind of like a watery look to the eyeball. Alright, so here we are so far. Here's the item in full completion before the UV resin. You can see the little veining around the eyeball, the dinginess around the meat texture. It's looking pretty good so far. I like how darkened out the overall item is. It makes it feel very like cankered and decayed. Now we're going to go over, just right before we do the UV resin, with some very vibrant cadmium red hue. Now that cadmium red hue is going to give that orange kind of red coloring to the blood texture, and we're only going to use it on the very high highlighted sculpted textures, and it's going to make the blood texture look really fresh and new. So whether it's been out drying out for a while or on the table, or the eyeball was just freshly ripped out by a dirty hand or something like that, for whatever reason, but there's a little bit of fresh blood coming to the surface of the meat texture, and that's the layer that we're applying now. So we're just going to go ahead and use the side of the brush here, and we're coming straight out of the cap of the cadmium red hue, and we're just going to go ahead and let this layer on to the meat texture, and it's going to give us those very vibrant red highlights. That's what we're looking for. The freshest blood on the gored item, as it were. All right, guys, I'm digging it. I'm loving the gore texture. Looking really good, you guys. Now we're going to go ahead and break out some UV resin. Now, it's just a generic aftermarket UV resin. You can find it in my Amazon affiliate list below. If you want to check it out, it's super pretty, overall cheap. You get like 3 containers of it, and it lasts a while depending on what you're doing with it. So we're going to go ahead and just layer this in, starting at the pupil, and we're going to go ahead in a circular motion. Just make sure we kind of push out any kind of major bubbles. I don't care if it has some bubbles in it, it's okay, because this is just supposed to be like a watery eyeball look to it. That's what we're using it for. We're just letting it kind of layer in over the eyeball the way we want it to. We're going to use the heat gun or a torch there to kind of pop any major bubbles here. And the goal here is to catch it and let it UV cure before it goes overly crazy around the outside meat red texture. That's the goal. So we want to make sure we can get it kind of, hold it upside down, get a good layer on it, and then make sure we kind of cure it up without the UV resin going out of control, if it makes any sense. So that's why I'm holding it upside down as I'm kind of pushing it, the UV resin around a little bit. I don't want to get it out of control. If we have a little bit of dripping, because it is an eyeball and we're using this to look like a water or like a liquidy source over the eyeball, that's okay if it gets a little bit out of control, but we don't want it to get too much out of control. Just it needs to be a little bit controlled, if that makes any sense. So we're going to go ahead and kind of hold that as we kind of cure it up and get it started to cure. And then once it starts to cure, we can kind of put it into the housing and it can kind of fully cure up on its own. The goal of the game right now is just to get the UV resin to where it stops moving. That way we don't get any drips that we just don't want. Drips we want are one thing, but drips we just don't need that. So here it is in the Igloo UV resin chamber. It's got that solar light, so it kind of rotates it there. Again, we got a little bit of dripping onto the meat textures, and that's okay. I'm not too worried about it. I think it looks kind of good as it drips down the item. And if it's held up against the magnet refrigerator, then it looks pretty cool, you guys. What do you think? I think it turned out absolutely spectacular. Look at the rich red color on the back. Not really the biggest part of the item, but it's definitely pretty cool. We want to make sure we give it some love and attention. And then here's the actual eye with the UV resin coating. Of course, we have the eyeball. It's got the veining and the dark coloration of the washes. And then we have this one is the blue iris with a little bit of glow pigment and those neon paints. We used a lot of washes and sepias and burnt umbers throughout this process, and those inks were $1 round ink. Now, of course, if you are looking for one of these on your own, whether an individual magnet for your awesome man cave or crafting station, or you'd like a keychain, I offer those as well. If you want this as a paintable because you are a member of my YouTube channel, just reach out to me and let me know. I'll sell you one for pretty cheap, and you can follow along with your own painting process. This is, after all, a full-length tutorial for my members here on my YouTube channel. Of course, if you'd like one of these painted for yourself, reach out to me. I'm always doing special commissions and requests all the time. But if you want this as an entire set for your own collection, then I do offer this in an assortment of zombie body parts. So pretty cool. I think next on the list will be the ear. So if you want to stay tuned for that, you guys, I will see you on the next awesome video from Byerly Studios. Again, remember that I've created quite a few of these painting processes in the past, and maybe in the near future we'll start to sculpt these out individually in their own sculpting process videos. But otherwise, guys, I hope you really did enjoy this long format tutorial, and I will catch you on the next awesome project. I appreciate you guys. Have a great weekend. Later.